The night was cold, and the hall was filled with whispers. People had come to see Keanu Reeves, not because he was a famous actor, but because they wanted to hear his words. It was an event about life, struggle, and hope. The host introduced him with respect, but many in the audience were doubtful. They thought, what could an actor tell us about real-life pain? Keanu stepped onto the stage slowly, wearing his usual simple clothes. His long hair fell to his shoulders, and his face carried calmness mixed with quiet sorrow. He looked at the crowd and gave a small smile, one that carried both humility and kindness. He did not start with jokes or light stories. Instead, he asked a question that made the hall silent. Have you ever felt like life was laughing at you when you were broken inside? The hall froze. People were not ready for that. Keanu's voice was soft, but it carried weight. In that moment, everyone leaned closer. He began telling his story. He spoke about his childhood, about how his father left when he was just a boy. He described nights when his mother worked hard to feed him and his sister, and how he learned very early that life was not fair. But kindness could still exist. His words were simple, but they touched hearts because they were true. I was not born into comfort, he said. There were days when we had little, but I learned something important. When people have little, they sometimes give the most. A neighbor who had almost nothing still shared food with us. I never forgot that. Kindness given in the hardest times becomes a light you carry forever. The audience shifted in their seats. Some nodded, some had tears forming. They had come expecting Hollywood stories, but they were hearing about real human struggles. But then Keanu surprised them again. He spoke of a time when his dreams seemed impossible. I wanted to act, he said, but I was told again and again that I was not good enough. People laughed at my accent. They mocked how I spoke. Some said I was too strange, too awkward. I could have listened to them. But something in me whispered that failure was not the end. It was only a beginning. He paused, letting silence build. Suspense grew because everyone wanted to know. How did he move forward when the world seemed against him? Keanu shared how he kept trying, how he went to small auditions, how he faced rejection after rejection. But instead of bitterness, he learned humility. Every no taught me patience, he explained. Every closed door taught me to keep walking until one door finally opened. People leaned forward. They saw themselves in his story. They remembered their own rejections, their own wounds, and they felt less alone. But then his voice grew heavier. He told them about the tragedies that nearly destroyed him. He spoke of the day he lost his best friend, River Phoenix. The pain of that loss still echoed in his words. When River died, he said softly, I felt the world had no mercy. I asked myself why someone so young, so full of life, had to leave so soon. I thought maybe kindness does not matter. Maybe life is just cruel. The hall was silent now. You could hear breaths. You could feel hearts sinking. Keanu stood there, calm yet broken, his honesty pulling everyone deeper into the story. But then he spoke with resilience. It took me years to understand, he continued, that grief never leaves you. But it can also become your teacher. It taught me that we do not control how long we have, but we control how we live the days we are given. We control whether we spend them bitter or whether we use them to lift others. The crowd began to see where his wisdom came from. It was not from books, not from fame, not from wealth. It was carved into him by loss, rejection, and struggle. Then he shared something no one expected. He spoke of his daughter, who was stillborn, and of the deep sorrow that followed. He spoke of losing his partner shortly after. People in the hall gasped quietly. Many had never heard him open his heart in such detail. I broke down, he admitted. I thought I could not continue. I thought my life had no meaning. I walked alone in empty streets. I sat in silence. I stared at the night sky, asking questions that had no answers. But in those moments, I saw something. I saw strangers holding each other. I saw people helping a person who had fallen. I realized life hurts, but life also heals, not always in big ways, but in small acts of love. Suddenly, the doubts people carried when he walked in began to melt away. They realized he was not here to entertain. He was here to remind them of something deeper. He leaned forward, his voice stronger now. We all suffer. We all face moments when we feel destroyed. But I learned this. If you carry kindness, if you respect even strangers, If you stay humble no matter what happens, then you survive. Not only survive, you give others a reason to survive too. The hall broke into quiet applause, not loud claps, but the kind that comes from hearts moved deeply. And yet, Keanu was not finished. He promised to share something later that would leave them silent. He told them, "There is one story I never told anyone. A story of a night when I had nothing left, and a stranger's words saved me. I will share that before this evening ends." Suspense filled the air. The audience could not look away. They wanted to know. What happened that night? Who was that stranger? How did a single moment change Keanu Reeves forever? People sat straighter, knowing this was not just a talk. It was a journey into pain, kindness, and survival. This was only the beginning, and already hearts were hooked. The hall was heavy with silence after Keanu promised to share a story he had never told before. People leaned forward in their seats, waiting for his next words, their eyes locked on him as if he held something that could change the way they saw their own lives. Keanu did not rush. He let the quiet stay, almost as if he wanted the audience to feel the weight of stillness before he spoke again. He finally looked down at the wooden floor, then back at the people watching him. His voice was calm, but there was a tremble in it. "You know," he said slowly, "the hardest part of suffering is not the pain itself. It is the silence after the pain. It is the moment when you feel no one sees you, no one hears you, and you are nothing but a shadow walking in a world that has no place for you." The words pierced the air. A woman in the front row covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. A young man at the back shifted uncomfortably, remembering nights when he himself had felt invisible. Keanu's words were not just his story. They became a mirror for everyone in the room. He continued, "There was one night years ago when I felt I had lost everything. My heart was empty, my dreams seemed pointless, and I sat alone on a park bench at midnight. It was cold, it was raining lightly, and I felt like even the sky was mocking me. I thought maybe I should just disappear. Maybe the world does not need me." People gasped softly. Suspense grew. No one expected Keanu Reeves, a man known worldwide, to admit that once he almost gave up, but then he leaned closer to the microphone and said, "And that was when it happened. A stranger, someone I had never met before, walked up to me. He did not know my name, he did not know my story. He only saw a man sitting alone in the rain. He stopped, gave me half of his sandwich, and said one sentence. Just one. But that sentence carried me back to life. The hall was restless now. Hearts were racing. What did the stranger say? What could possibly be so powerful? Keanu smiled faintly, but did not reveal it yet. Instead, he pulled back and told them, "I will tell you those words tonight before we end. But I want you to understand something first. That moment did not happen because the stranger was rich or powerful. It happened because he cared. It happened because he noticed. It happened because kindness, even small, can save someone who is standing at the edge." The audience felt both frustration and wonder. They wanted the full story. But Keanu was slowly guiding them deeper, making them live the suspense, making them think about their own power to change lives. He moved to another memory. "After that night, I realized that respect is not about titles or fame or money. Respect is about seeing people, really seeing them. I began to notice the taxi driver who worked double shifts so his daughter could study. I noticed the waiter who still smiled even after standing for 12 hours. I noticed the janitor cleaning the floor when everyone else had left. They are heroes, though no one claps for them. They carry the world quietly, and without them, life would collapse." The hall grew warmer, filled with nods and soft clapping. His words made people look around at each other differently, as if even strangers sitting nearby deserved more kindness. But Keanu was not finished. He wanted to shake their hearts even more. He told them about a time during his early career when he had been rejected for a major role. "I was told straight to my face, 'You are not good enough. You will never make it big.' Those words could have killed me inside. But I walked out of that room and remembered the sandwich that stranger had shared with me. I remembered that one sentence, and I thought maybe I am not worthless. Maybe I should try again." Suspense rose higher. People whispered to each other, desperate to know what the stranger had said. Keanu paused, took a sip of water, and let his eyes wander over the crowd. Then he said, "Every time life pushed me down, I remembered. Every time I thought of giving up, I remembered. That is how I survived the storms. Not because I was stronger than others, but because someone's small kindness planted strength in me." Suddenly, a man in the second row stood up without meaning to. He was emotional, and his voice cracked as he asked, "What did he say, Keanu? Please, tell us." Keanu gave a faint smile and replied gently, "Not yet. Because if I tell you now, you might only hear the words. I want you to feel them. I want you to live through this story with me. And when I finally share them, you will not just hear them, you will carry them with you forever." The audience sighed, half frustrated, half enchanted. The suspense was unbearable, but they could not stop listening. He then shared another twist. He spoke of a film set where he secretly took a pay cut so that the crew could be paid better. "I never told anyone at the time," he explained, "because kindness loses its purity when it looks for applause. I only knew that without them, the film could not exist. Without them, I could not do my job. Respect is not about standing higher, it is about standing together." Applause broke out, louder this time. People were moved not just by his humility, but by the idea that someone at the top still thought of those at the bottom. But as the clapping faded, Keanu leaned in and lowered his voice, pulling everyone back into suspense. "Still," he said, "all of this, my survival, my resilience, my choices, goes back to that one night. One man, one sentence, one act of kindness that lit a fire inside me when my soul was almost gone. I will tell you soon. I promise." And just like that, the tension in the hall doubled. Everyone knew they had to stay. No one would dare to leave until they heard the secret Keanu had been carrying for years. The hall was heavy with tension. People sat frozen in their seats, their hearts locked on every word Keanu spoke. He had promised to reveal the words of a stranger that once saved him, but he had held back again, building suspense like a storyteller who knew the value of patience. Still, no one dared leave. Even those who had come out of curiosity now leaned forward, unable to look away. Keanu stood silently for a long moment, his eyes soft but distant, as if he was looking back into his own past. The audience waited. The silence was almost unbearable. Finally, he spoke again. "Sometimes," he said, his voice calm but deep, "life gives you lessons in ways you never expect. When I was young, I thought pain was the enemy. I thought sadness meant weakness. But then I learned pain itself can be a teacher. Sadness can sharpen your eyes. Suffering can give you compassion that nothing else can." People nodded. They had felt it themselves. Life had tested them in ways they did not always understand. Keanu was not just speaking about himself anymore. He was speaking about them. Then he shared a story from the days after he lost his partner. He described how every day felt like carrying a stone on his chest, how every laugh around him felt like noise, and how he sometimes stayed awake until sunrise, because sleep meant facing dreams that hurt too much. "I remember walking into a grocery store one night," he said softly. "I picked up bread, milk, and nothing more. The cashier looked at me, smiled, and said, 'You look tired, but I hope your night gets better.' Such simple words. But that night, they mattered. Sometimes the smallest human connection can feel like a rope pulling you back from the dark." The audience was silent again. People began remembering their own moments of kindness. Maybe a stranger once opened a door for them when they were lost in thought. Maybe someone once gave them a smile on the hardest day of their lives. Keanu was making them feel the power of these small, invisible threads that held people together. Suddenly, he shifted the story. His voice grew sharper, filled with a quiet intensity. "But here is the truth," he said. "Not everyone will be kind to you. Many will laugh at your pain. Many will walk past you when you are broken. I have seen people mock me. I have seen people betray me. I have seen people act cruel simply because they could. And in those moments, you will ask yourself, why should I keep my heart soft? Why should I keep giving kindness when the world does not return it?" This question hit the audience like a wave. People had asked themselves the same thing many times. They stared at him, waiting for his answer. Keanu looked down for a moment, then back up. Because if you let the world make you hard, then the world has already won. Because if cruelty kills your kindness, then suffering has stolen your soul. I decided long ago, no matter how much I lost, I would never let go of kindness. I would never stop respecting people even if they did not respect me back. The hall erupted in applause. Some clapped with tears in their eyes. Others shouted softly, unable to control their emotions. Keanu stood still, not soaking in the applause, but letting it wash through the room like a river of shared pain and healing. Yet he was not done. He stepped closer to the microphone, lowering his voice again to draw them back into suspense. "There is something else you must know," he whispered. "When I was at my lowest, I had one more moment that changed me forever. It was years ago, after another rejection, another night of loneliness. I had no strength left. I sat on the steps of a theater, my head in my hands, thinking I had nothing left to give. And that was when I heard footsteps, slow, steady footsteps. Someone sat beside me. And it was that night the stranger spoke those words I promised to tell you. But not yet. Not yet." The audience groaned softly in frustration and excitement. Some laughed nervously, some shook their heads. He was pulling them deeper into the story, and they knew it. But they also knew they would not move until he revealed it. Instead, Keanu told them another lesson. "I realized something after those nights. Suffering and rejection are not there to destroy you. They are there to shape you. Every no I heard in my life, every door slammed in my face, every person who mocked me, it all became part of my strength. And the only reason I survived it was because of respect. Respect for myself and respect for others. Even when no one respected me." The crowd shifted again. People were whispering to each other, their faces lit with recognition. They thought about their own failures, their own humiliations, and suddenly, those memories felt less like wounds and more like fuel. Keanu's tone grew emotional again. "There is something else," he said. "Kindness is not always about saving lives. Sometimes it is about saving moments. A kind word can turn a night around. A small gesture can give someone a reason to keep going. The stranger who shared his sandwich with me, he did not just give me food. He gave me dignity. He reminded me I was human." The hall erupted again with soft clapping, and some stood up without even realizing it. People felt as if they were living inside his story, as if his words were not just spoken, but etched into the air around them. But Keanu was careful. He ended the session with another promise. His eyes softened and his voice grew tender. "Before this journey ends, I will tell you the exact words he said. I will not keep them from you forever. But when I speak them, I want you to remember them for the rest of your lives. Not as something I told you, but as something you can give to others when they are at the edge. That is how we pass wisdom. Not by keeping it, but by giving it away." The room fell silent once more. People were restless but deeply moved. They knew the reveal was coming, and they also knew the story was not over yet. The air inside the hall was thick with anticipation. People sat forward in their chairs, gripping the armrests, their eyes fixed on Keanu. He had promised again and again that he would reveal the words spoken to him by that stranger on a rainy night. Yet, every time he pulled them deeper into the suspense, holding them right at the edge of discovery. And still no one moved. Not a single person wanted to leave before hearing the truth. Keanu looked around slowly, as if scanning each face. He let the silence grow so heavy that some could almost hear their own heartbeat. Then he said quietly, "I see the impatience in your eyes. You want to know the words. You think if I tell you now, the story will be complete. But the truth is, those words only have meaning if you understand what led to them. Pain gave them power. Rejection gave them depth. Without the journey, the words are only letters. But with the journey, they are life itself." People shifted in their seats. Some closed their eyes, almost as if bracing themselves for whatever was coming. Others whispered softly to one another, but quickly stopped, afraid they might miss something. Keanu continued, "Before I share those words, I want to tell you about a mistake I once made. It was after I started acting, after I began to earn some recognition. For a short time, I believed success would heal me. I thought fame would erase pain. I thought money would protect me from loss. But I was wrong. Success can give you comfort, but it cannot fill the holes in your soul. Money can buy distraction, but it cannot buy peace." The audience grew quiet again. His honesty disarmed them. Many of them had dreamed of fame or wealth, but here was a man who had lived it, telling them it was not the answer they thought it would be. He stepped closer to the microphone. I remember walking into a grand party once filled with people laughing and drinking. Everyone seemed alive, but I felt like a ghost. I was surrounded by faces, yet completely alone. I understood in that moment, loneliness does not disappear just because the room is full. Sometimes loneliness is loudest when you stand in the middle of a crowd. The words hit hard. People nodded. Some wiped their eyes quietly. They had felt it too. Loneliness in marriages, in workplaces, even in families. His story was their story, but Keanu did not stop there. He leaned in and spoke with more intensity. So I made a choice. I decided to live differently. I decided I would treat people with respect, no matter who they were. The driver, the cleaner, the waiter, they all deserved the same kindness as a director or a producer. Because I learned, you never know who is sitting on their own bench in the rain, one breath away from giving up. You never know who is waiting for one sentence to save them. The hall broke into applause again, stronger this time. People clapped not just because of his words, but because they felt a sudden responsibility. They realized their actions, no matter how small, might carry more power than they ever imagined. Keanu let the applause settle, then lowered his voice. Do you see what I am saying? Every one of you here tonight has the power to save someone. Not with money. Not with fame, but with kindness, with presence, with a few simple words spoken at the right time. Suspense filled the room again. They thought he might finally share those words now. Some people even leaned so far forward they almost fell off their chairs. But Keanu shook his head gently. Not yet, he whispered, a small smile forming on his lips. I will tell you. But I want you to feel the weight of waiting, because waiting teaches patience, and patience teaches value. If I gave you the words too quickly, you might forget them tomorrow. But if you wait, if you ache for them, they will stay with you forever. A low groan of frustration ran through the hall, mixed with soft laughter. People were caught between wanting the reveal now and trusting his wisdom to guide them deeper. Then he gave them another story. I once worked on a film where a young crew member dropped expensive equipment by accident. Everyone shouted at him, everyone humiliated him. He stood frozen, his face pale, thinking he had lost his career that day. I walked over, put my hand on his shoulder, and said, mistakes do not define you. What you do after them does. Years later, he came back to me and said those words kept him in the industry. Today, he is one of the finest crew members I have ever known. The audience applauded again, softer, more emotional. They began to realize that perhaps the stranger's words were not magic. They were human, simple, yet unforgettable because they arrived at the right moment. Keanu then added something shocking. What I am telling you now is not about me being strong. I am not stronger than anyone here. I have cried in silence. I have broken down. I have questioned why I even exist. But every time I remembered that one night, that stranger, those words, they did not make me invincible, but they reminded me I was human. And sometimes being human is enough. People gasped and some clapped again, but softer, almost reverent. He looked around, his eyes glistening slightly. When I reveal those words, you will see they are not complicated. They are not poetic, but that is why they are powerful. Because the most powerful truths in life are always simple. The audience could barely breathe now. Suspense had built to its highest point yet. Still, he would not give it away. Not yet. Keanu raised his hand and said gently, I will tell you in the next part of this journey. And when I do, you will understand why I carried those words with me for so many years. The hall was restless, filled with sighs, murmurs, and heavy silence. But no one moved. No one wanted to lose their chance to hear the final truth. The hall was alive with restless energy. People leaned forward, hearts pounding, their breaths held. For 4 parts of his story, Keanu had carried them through pain, humility, kindness, and the small acts that shaped his journey. But there was one thing left hanging in the air. The words spoken by that stranger on the rainy night. The words that Keanu said had carried him through rejection, grief, and loss. The words that, even now, gave him strength to stand before them. Keanu let the silence linger before he spoke again. His voice was low, steady, and filled with gravity. I know you have been waiting, he said softly. Some of you are growing impatient. Some of you may even feel frustrated. But I wanted you to wait because waiting has a way of sharpening the heart. Now, tonight, I will share the words that saved me. The audience froze. No one blinked. No one whispered. It felt as though time itself had stopped. But instead of telling them right away, Keanu took a slow breath and said, "Before I give you the words, I want you to imagine this with me. Imagine you are sitting alone on a cold night. You have nothing. Your dreams are shattered. Your hope is gone. You believe no one cares if you disappear tomorrow." That was me. That was the place I was in. And then, a man I had never met, someone who had no reason to stop, sat beside me. He handed me half of his sandwich and he looked me in the eye. His words were simple, but they were the rope that pulled me back from the edge. People clutched their chests. Some wiped their eyes already, as if bracing for what was coming. Finally, Keanu leaned forward, his voice breaking slightly as he revealed the words. He said, "It's not over for you. Your story is still being written." Gasps filled the hall. Some people broke into tears instantly. Others whispered the sentence to themselves as if testing how it sounded in their own lives. Keanu's eyes softened as he repeated it, slower this time. "It's not over for you. Your story is still being written." He let the words settle into the hearts of everyone present. Silence followed, powerful, heavy silence that carried more weight than applause. Then he continued. "Those words did not solve my problems overnight. They did not bring back what I had lost, but they gave me a reason to breathe one more day. They reminded me that I was not finished, that maybe tomorrow could be different. Those words became my shield. Every time I faced rejection, I whispered them to myself. Every time grief returned, I whispered them again. When the world laughed at me, when doors closed, when I felt alone, I said to myself, my story is still being written." The audience was overcome. Many were crying openly now because they knew what it meant to need words like that. They thought of nights when they had almost given up, when they had thought their story was already over. Keanu looked at them with deep kindness. "Some of you here tonight need to hear those words. Some of you have been carrying silent pain. Some of you think your life has already been decided, that you will never rise again. But I am telling you now, your story is still being written. The page you are on is not the last page." The hall erupted into applause, not loud and wild, but long and emotional. People clapped while wiping tears, clapped while whispering to themselves, clapped because they felt alive again. But Keanu was not finished. He gave them another twist. "You see," he said, "I never saw that man again. I do not know his name. I do not know where he came from, but he gave me something priceless. And that is when I understood. The power of kindness is not in how long it lasts, but in when it is given. You might only meet someone once, but your kindness can live in them forever." The audience gasped again. They realized they too had the power to be someone's stranger in the rain. Keanu smiled faintly. "You do not need to be famous. You do not need to be rich. You only need to notice. Notice the tired cashier. Notice the quiet friend. Notice the lonely man sitting in the corner. Because maybe, just maybe, your words will be the ones that remind them their story is not over." He let his words sink deep into the crowd before sharing something even more personal. "People sometimes call me strong, but I am not strong. I am only someone who refused to stop turning the pages of my life. And I owe that to a stranger who reminded me I still had pages left. I never forgot him, and I never forgot those words. And tonight, I give them to you." A standing ovation filled the room. People could not hold back. They rose from their seats, clapping, crying, some hugging each other. Keanu did not bask in the applause. He lowered his head slightly, his humility shining through even in that moment of triumph. And then, just as the applause began to settle, he gave them one last suspenseful promise. "Tonight you heard the words that saved me, but in the final part of this journey, I will tell you how I chose to pass those words on to someone else. And when I did, I saw with my own eyes how one sentence can change not just a life, but generations." The hall was silent again, filled with wonder, waiting for the last chapter. The hall had gone through every emotion: silence, tears, applause, frustration, hope. Now it was time for the final part. Keanu had revealed the words that once saved him. It's not over for you. Your story is still being written, but he had promised one last thing. He said he would tell them how he passed those words on and how they carried power not just for him, but for others too. He looked around at the faces before him. Some still had tears on their cheeks. Others sat with eyes shining, as if their hearts had been cracked open and filled with new light. Tonight, Keanu began softly, I have told you how a stranger saved me with one sentence. But words are not meant to be locked away. They are meant to be passed on. So let me tell you about a day when I had the chance to do the same. The audience leaned in. They could feel this was the climax, the final gift he had saved for them. A few years ago, Keanu continued, I was walking in a quiet part of the city. I saw a young man sitting alone on the steps of a subway station. He was holding his head in his hands, and even though the street was busy, people walked past him as if he was invisible. I stopped, because something about him reminded me of myself years ago. I walked over, sat beside him, and asked, Are you okay? He didn't look up at first, but then he whispered, I don't think I can do this anymore. I think my life is already finished. The hall fell silent again. Many in the audience knew what it was like to feel that way. Keanu's voice grew tender. I looked at him and I remembered that rainy night, that stranger, that sandwich. I remembered the words that carried me through everything, and I knew exactly what I had to say. I put my hand on his shoulder and told him, It's not over for you. Your story is still being written. A collective gasp filled the room. People clutched their hearts, some sobbing openly. Keanu paused, his own eyes moist. The boy looked at me with disbelief, like no one had ever told him that before. He started crying. Not quiet tears. He broke down, right there on those steps. I stayed with him. I listened. I reminded him that one dark chapter does not mean the whole book is over. After a while, he stood up. He said, Thank you. Maybe I'll stay alive one more day. And sometimes, one more day is all a person needs. The audience broke into long applause, but Keanu held up his hand gently, asking them to wait. A year later, he said, I received a letter. It was from that young man. In it, he wrote, Because of that night, I chose not to end my story. I went back to school. I reconnected with my family. I even started writing music again. Today I am alive because you reminded me my story was not over. People in the hall were crying freely now. Some covered their faces. Others held on to strangers beside them. Keanu's voice shook slightly as he finished the story. And that is when I realized the truth. Those words were never mine to keep. They were a gift given to me, and my duty was to give them away. I am only a bridge, a messenger. And tonight I pass them on to you. So if you ever feel broken, if you ever feel like life has ended for you, remember this. Your story is still being written. The page you are on is not the last. And if you have strength, pass those words to someone else. Because you never know how many lives they might save. The hall rose to its feet, a standing ovation like no other. People clapped, cried, embraced. The air was thick with respect, humility, kindness, and the raw truth that everyone needed to hear. Keanu did not bow. He did not take a dramatic pause. He simply lowered his head, smiled softly, and stepped back from the microphone. His humility said more than any speech ever could. The audience left that night changed. Not because they heard a Hollywood star speak, but because they had been reminded of something deeply human, that kindness is timeless, that respect heals, that resilience grows from pain, and that as long as you are breathing, your story is not finished. And somewhere, in the hearts of those who listened, new pages began to be written.